So on August the 1st, after 3 months of knowing that tariffs were coming into effect in South Africa, and the South African government doing absolutely nothing to stem the bleeding or even try to feign a bit of urgency, knowing full well, because economists all across the country, as well as laymen like myself who just have a fleeting interest in economics, was warning and saying, look, this is going to be really bad for the South African economy. It's not like we have an economy that has headroom, right? We're not already growing at 5 or 6% a year, where erasing 0.2 to 0.4% of the growth will really amass to anything. South Africa is currently growing at best by about 0.8 to 0.9% per year. And that is only if we go by the official numbers of the government, not the unofficial numbers, which is actually far worse. The South African economy is not growing because specifically in this instance, and I've said this before, but I like to repeat it so that people understand, when you look at economic growth, you have to offset that or compare that to population growth, because an economy is only good if it can actually service the people of the country. So if you have population growth at about maybe 2.5, 2.9%, you would want economic growth to at least be 2.5 to 3%. Arguably, you would want to have it about double what your population growth is, but at least matching it would be good. Because if it doesn't match, then it means that number, that growth on your population, has to be subtracted from the economic growth number, because there's more people now and the economy isn't able to cater or support the more people. South Africa has not done that in a very long time, just by the way, pretty much since Jacob Zuma got into office. But we'll get into that. So all of this is to say, if you now wipe about 0.4% off of the growth of South Africa, we're done, right? Or like completely done. So you'll effectively wipe out any and all economic growth that we have in this country. Now, after all of this has happened, Cyril Ramaphosa, I am pleased to announce, has finally called President Donald Trump for the second time. This is, of course, days after the tariffs have already come into effect. We already know that 750 million rand worth of contracts were cancelled literally day one from one of our largest automotive manufacturers, or at least part manufacturers in the country. There's a bunch of other stuff that's starting to hit the country, like Maersk, for example, the shipping giant, canceling all direct trade routes from South Africa to America. So a lot of bad stuff is currently happening, and that's just the stuff that we already know about. For a lot of other things, you have to remember something like our agricultural departments and our agricultural sector, they're only going to be hit once our summer starts and towards the end of our summer, because the way international global trade works is countries like America aren't currently buying all of our produce. They don't have to. Most of our produce, at least the stuff that we produce en masse here in South Africa, is currently not within season for them. They don't need that stuff right now. They can grow it themselves. They're going to start to need that stuff in a bit, right? As soon as their winter starts and our summer starts, they're going to start to import a lot. And this is when our farmers will really feel it. Luckily for most of us citrus farmers, I think a lot of their goods were already sort of banked long before the tariffs came into effect. So they'll only start feeling the pressures next year. So we don't even know yet what the actual outcome is going to be, but it's probably not going to be good. Now, I used News 24 here. Don't worry, I use them on purpose, because my problem is, right, a lot of the time, News 24 and the other media companies in South Africa, they'll do the reporting just fine. The issue is that they'll never fact check the stuff that's being said, which is one of the signs of a corrupt media. Your job is to report the news, yes, but it's also then to make sure that you have the actual facts of what is actually being said and what is actually happening. So, okay, Ramaphosa calls President Trump. Of course, in proper South African fashion, we don't actually know what has been said, what has been discussed, which the only thing this tells me is that not much, right? There was not much movement in either way. So, according to the official spokesperson for the presidency, Vincent Magwenya, not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, President Ramaphosa and President Trump discussed bilateral trade matters, emphasizing their commitment to continued dialogue. This is all corporate speak or political speak for basically just say, don't tariff us. Both leaders acknowledged the complexity of ongoing trade negotiations involving the United States and expressed readiness for further collaborative engagements. Detailed discussions will be advanced by the respective trade negotiation teams. Now, basically, that entire thing is to say nothing actually got done. The Americans are not budging. Why aren't they budging? Because they gave the South Africans a basic framework of the bare minimum before they'll even begin to discuss bilateral trade negotiations or bilateral trade agreements where South Africa maybe escapes a lot of the more punishing tariffs. And I want to be clear, it's not like South Africa needs 0% tariffs. If we just got tariffed at about 10%, maybe 15%, that'd be great, right? The rand is super weak against the dollar. It's fine, right? Just the rand to dollar strength will allow us to basically circumvent all of that 10%. So we don't need to go down to zero. 30% becomes really, really bad. And the Trump administration chose that number for a reason. They understood that 10% won't do anything. 30%, that will hurt. Literally, as President Ramaphosa is reaching out to Trump to try and put out the fire, you have this man, Fikile Mbalula, basically going off on a real one, which just tells you how absolute in shambles the ANC is. Ramaphosa is trying to tell Trump, hey, we love you, don't do anything to us, just work with us. And then literally the guy second in command effectively of the ANC is going, he must come. He must come. Bring him. We don't care, right? We'll do whatever we want in this country. But okay, so the government spokesperson or the president's spokesperson goes on to say, government's efforts remain focused on growing the economy to save and create new jobs, which include intensifying diversification efforts and strengthening our global supply chain integration as the country works to expand its export markets to Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and across Africa to enhance our economic resilience. None of those countries will be able to offset the trade lost from America. Just by the way, America is the single largest consumer market in the world. In fact, the American consumer market comprises, it's larger than most of the other countries combined, right? It's insane how big the American consumer market is and just how much money Americans spend buying goods from all across the world, which is nice. If you live in a first world country, the greatest country on earth, you can do and spend as much as you want on other people's crap. And it doesn't matter, right? Everyone else gets rich and the Americans get stuff. That's pretty good, right? So none of these other countries will help. But let's just quickly fact check, right? What exactly is this government's focus? Because they say their focus will be on growing the economy and diversification efforts. That, of course, just means racial liberation effectively. So I thought, okay, let's quickly look at the unemployment rate, because apparently that's something that we're working towards. Fikile Mbalula said that's why America can go kick rocks, because we are focused on making the lives of our people better. Doesn't look much better. From 1991, with an unemployment rate of 23%, you can see from 1994, the unemployment rate actually starts to get a little bit better. And it's starting to go down quite nicely since 2008 with Thabo Mbeki. Both Nelson Mandela and Thabo Mbeki followed sound economic principles. They allowed the economy to grow. They allowed the free market to free market. They allowed people to take care of themselves. And they just created an environment where people wanted to invest. And you see how it's going down year after year. The unemployment rate is actually going down. The economy is like a snowball. If you just keep going, that number will plummet after a specific period of time. And by this time, we probably would have been down to like 10% of unemployment, right? But okay, so in 2008, Jacob Zuma comes to power and we see it spike to 23%. 24%, 24%, 24%, 24%, 24%, 25%, 26%, 27, 26, 28, 29, 34, 33, 32, 33. Just look at that spike. You see, in the same way that good and healthy economic policies will over time make unemployment go down, and eventually it will start going down rapidly as your country keeps expanding because it's exponential growth that's happening. In that same way, bad economic policy will make it go bad and bad and bad slowly first, and then very bad very quickly because it's exponential, right? That's how economies work. Okay, so unemployment It's not gotten any better. How about just the economy and spending money on the unemployed? Oof, that also doesn't look too great. Now, it should be mentioned that a lot of this is just also as a result of the Rand getting absolutely hammered. Because if you look at this chart, grant expenditure in red here is by 1994 prices. So if we didn't have all of this inflation and the government weren't absolutely destroying the economy, we wouldn't have had anywhere near this amount of trouble. But because the Rand has been absolutely destroyed, right, we're seeing this massive spike in social grant expenditure. But then just look at the South African GDP. And again, the same story plays itself out every single time. The economy is growing. It's starting to do really well. By 2008, the economy is growing at 3.19%. Now, remember, this was the whole period with Thabo Mbeki being replaced. So there would have been muted growth in that year because investors weren't entirely sure what was going to happen. But then Jacob Zuma comes to power. In 2009, we see the economy for the first time take a massive dump. This is because of load shedding. Remember, they were warned that load shedding would happen all the way back in 1998, right? That's when they were warned that this will happen. And this is the result of that. Since then, Jacob Zuma manages to pull back a little to 3.4%, although that's just sort of recovery. And then you see a downward trend. Then you have COVID in 2020, minus 6% growth. It recovers a little bit, but remember, it's minus 6. So it still actually didn't grow by about 2%. So minus 2% real growth because we didn't even recover the losses that we had in 2020 in 2021. And since then, it's been ever going downwards. So, in other words, this economic growth and the diversification of the economic market in South Africa that the ANC keeps touting, the liberation of our people, my question to South Africans would be, when is this happening? If you look at these statistics and you go through every single one of these statistics, my question is, when exactly is this supposed to start? Because it seems to be getting worse, not better. Right. And this, by the way, isn't one of those, before you can get better, you have to feel a little bit sicker. That's not how this works. At some point, you have to start seeing signs of some kind of recovery. We're not seeing those signs. Right. So you keep touting that the liberation isn't over and we will liberate this country. But when? The real results don't seem to show any of that. And of course, finally, they just sort of hammered in that they're going to be spending more of the money that we don't have on helping the companies that are now suffering under the tariffs because of South Africa's lack of actually doing anything about those tariffs when we had the opportunity to do so. Fundamentally, guys, the phone call is a complete dud. It doesn't matter. It doesn't do anything because effectively all that was said there is, sure, we can talk. Trump is not interested in having any conversations with South Africa because South Africa isn't taking him seriously. We still seem to think that he'll change his mind. That he will eventually remove the tariffs on South Africa. Even if Trump removed all of the tariffs from all of the other countries, he could still keep them on South Africa, and that wouldn't bother him or America at all. We need to start taking this seriously. Our government needs to start taking things seriously, or they need to step aside. Get out of the way so that South Africans can start to make their lives better. That's the only real option. But anyways, let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about this. Really appreciate everything that you guys are doing. For all of the people that continuously comment, that subscribe, that like the videos, I really appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. If you want to see more content like this and you want to support this channel, please keep doing all of those things. Remember, if you start disliking what I do, you can literally just click that button to unsubscribe from the channel. So you literally have nothing to lose. Then, to all of the people that want to support this channel a little bit more directly, link to Patreon in the description down below, or just hit the join button right below this video. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.